being fast and going and pushing yourself and your vehicle beyond the limits is what racing is about.
Chapo Racing!
That's racing. You're sometimes got to do your best at your worst.
All of a sudden, it can change in a heartbeat. In life, I've always loved to challenge myself, and so I also love racing because it's a challenge, and it's a constant challenge. Baja and Best in the Desert are the biggest and best and well-known off-road races. And so racing is this thing that's like, here is these rules, and all you have to follow is this. Figure out everything else yourself and go do it the best you possibly can. When I first got started in racing, I had no idea how expensive it was gonna be. I thought like this, I was just gonna go out and get a car and then I was just gonna go race it continuously. Boy, was I in for a surprise. When I went out there, we took a brand new Polaris, beat it to death kind of, but it was only maybe an hour-long race. And I thought, wow, this is easy. You just buy a car and you put some seat belts in it and you kind of go out and race it. And then I went out and I bought a real race car. And I went out and bought a Best in the Desert / Score legal race car, which is, you got to have a full chromoly cage and a fuel cell. So the car has to be built in a particular way to meet all these safety regulations. When the Murrays sort of educated me, they said, do you really know what you're getting into? And I really didn't have a clue. That was just the beginning of what it costs to race, is buying the race car. That is just a fraction of what it actually costs. Each of these races can be upwards of just the entry fees alone of $5,000 a piece. So when you're talking about taking a 20-man crew down to Mexico to drive from Ensenada all the way to La Paz, and you're doing it in multiple motorhomes and multiple vehicles, some of these races can be upwards of $30,000 to $50,000 to do a single race. Racing takes a huge amount of time commitment. And it's not just your time, you're asking a lot of other people to put their time in. But when you really get into these bigger races, the Best in the Deserts and the Scores, the long races, anything over 100 miles, you're really talking about a big commitment. My first Score race, I had no idea what logistics would be like. I didn't know that you even needed to do a whole lot of planning. Of course, I thought there was some, but you need to know where every single car is going to be, what parts are going to be at what location at any given time, how much fuel you're going to use from point A to point B, and where you're going to be at any given time during that. And all that has to be planned out ahead. And then you have to find out hotels for these people. Where are they going to stay? Where are they going to eat? What are you going to buy? What currency do you need with you at that time? So all of that stuff has to be planned way in ahead. And then in addition, you're trying to find a race car in the middle of the desert, and there is no cell phone reception half the time. You're kind of wondering where the car is. And that is what Baja is about. It's kind of the fun part, but it's also a huge time commitment to take on that responsibility, because everybody's looking to you to say, hey, where do I need to be? What parts do I need? And where am I going to go? And then where am I sleeping? And when am I going to eat next? So the time commitment is amazingly overwhelming compared to what I thought it was going to be in the beginning.
You meet a lot of people in this industry. We really like surrounding ourselves with good people. The amount of work that they put in, their passion for the sport, getting behind Chapo Racing and his team and their family, their crew, it was a good decision for us, and we're glad we did it.
Thank you. Thank you.
The reason that we decided to sponsor Chapo Racing were quite a few, but the main ones were that it was a quality operation that was run very well. Their I's are dotted, the T's are crossed. They're a great group of guys who have one thing at heart, and that is to win races, and win races fairly and the best they possibly can.
The Chapo Racing motto is basically never give up. We learned that early on. Racing is hard. Statistically speaking, only 40% of the racers finish, and we've been fortunate enough in this particular car here, since we switched over to the X3, to never DNF, which means did not finish or do not finish a race. So we've finished every mile of every race course that we've raced so far. And the reason for that is what we learned is never give up. It's hard. Things are going to break, parts are going to fail, you're going to become fatigued. There's going to be points where you're going to question why you even do any of this. You just have to remember that that will pass, and working hard at something will always give you benefits. Some of these things are the reasons why racing Baja is so challenging and why we want to do it. We do it because it's hard, not because it's easy. We do it because it's a challenge.
One of the reasons that we race Baja, it gets in your blood and you can't get it out, and you end up going back every single year for more.
Baja is this amazing place that has the most different terrains you can imagine. It has 110-degree dry lake beds. It has 30-degree mountainous tops. You can drive in an hour and feel like you've traveled 1,000 miles already, and how different the terrain can be. When you're in Baja, anything can happen. It's as close to the Wild West as you can get.
You know, when you go down to Baja, just the game changes a lot. The competition changes a lot. You're not just necessarily racing one racer on a course. I mean, you're racing guys, you know, knowledge who've been down there for a long time versus you go do a best in desert race, and we're all racing the same course. I mean, there's very, very, very little deviations from that course. So between the two organizations, you know, super different, both great, you know, great companies, and they put on just amazing events. But you know, it takes a different person to go down in Baja and hit those challenges and put the time in. Part of the challenge, part of the competition is the pre-running, getting out there and you know, running and learning that course and finding the lines. There's a lot to be learned from taking the time and doing a really, really solid pre-run. You know, looking for the fast lines, looking for areas where, you know, I wouldn't necessarily say a shortcut, but just the better lines. There's, you know, Baja is a maze, and there's many ways to get from point A to point B and save time, save wear and tear on the car, and hit the least amount of hazards.
So at this year's San Felipe 250, we were fortunate enough to be able to go down and a week in advance and do the pre-running that we typically would do for a score race. We got all our dangers marked. We figured out the best way to get through certain sections or what speed we had to carry. So we had great knowledge from pre-running, and we did that part really well. Unfortunately, we were disqualified for reasons that still to this day don't make sense to me.
A driver's meeting is a place where the sanctioning body can use their platform to tell all the racers what the do's and don'ts are for that specific race. Each race is different. Certain sections, maybe certain portions of the course go through different towns, might have different speed limits or other items that can change prior to the race. It's their opportunity to tell you what to do and what not to do, so you should listen.
At the driver's meeting, SCORE announced, Jose G in particular, that this was a VCP to VCP race.
A VCP is a virtual checkpoint that is used in racing, and it's points that you're required to hit. These are points marked on the course that you need to make sure that you hit within a certain amount of feet, and you know, just to avoid course cutting.
This was the first time in all the drivers' meetings I've ever been to that I heard this announced. So myself, like many other racers that I've spoken to, kind of looked at each other and said, wow, it's a VCP to VCP race. We've never heard this announced before. This is a little different. So we went to our navigation, our lead nav, our way of looking at the course, and started looking for possible, you know, better lines or something that we maybe hadn't pre-ran. We kind of felt that we were at a disadvantage with this knowledge the night before the race versus weeks or months in advance, so that we could have pre-ran differently. So based on that knowledge that was shared the night before the race, we started looking at the maps and kind of seeing where possible better lines were based on that information of VCP to VCP. So on a portion of our race, we saw tracks going right, and we went ahead and followed and ended up on what we now know is called Morelia Road. We had no idea that that existed, that it was called Morelia Road. You have to remember, In racing, it's one group after another. It normally goes from fastest to slowest. So in front of us, we had trophy trucks, class 1s, class 10s, and so on and so forth. So we had a lot of teams with $1 million budgets ahead of us. So we figured if there's a bunch of tracks going in a particular way, it's probably a better line, even if we haven't pre-ran it. We ran our race. We got to the finish line and we were there physically first. We were ecstatic. It was like something out of a movie. We were shooting champagne at each other, high-fiving. It was completely amazing experience.
On the next morning, we woke up and we went and got our trophy and we went through the entire award ceremony. We were just ecstatic. The entire team was there.
All the hard work after getting second place in the Baja 1000 to finally, get a second place again, we knew we were heading in the right direction.
But we were destroyed emotionally when 11 days later, our official results were changed.
The reason stating short course. So we were completely confused. I went ahead and started calling people right away. Finally, I was able to get the cell phone number for Jose G, which is the director for SCORE International. He then advised me that we had been disqualified for taking Morelia Road. And I said, well, yes, we took a road. I said, we absolutely did, without a doubt, during a portion of our race, but we hit the VCPs as instructed. And he said, well, unfortunately, that road is off limits. So I basically said, well, how were we supposed to know that? What we did, we didn't know was wrong. I must have missed it. I was at the driver's meeting. I read the racer brief. I always look over all the paperwork prior to any race. I said, I didn't see that any Morelia Road was off limits. He said, well, it was said at the driver's meeting. So unfortunately, we didn't have a copy of the driver's meeting, so I was kind of confused that I might have missed it. I was kind of upset. I felt like it was all my fault for choosing to go that direction. We then started a campaign to find a recording of the driver's meeting to see if I had actually missed it or if my team had actually missed it, because Chapo, the driver, was there, and as well as another one of our team members, Juan. So we started this campaign, and after a few days, we were able to get a copy of the driver's meeting. We reviewed it. At the driver's meeting, it was repeatedly said that it was a race from VCP to VCP, that if anybody was off course for any section of the race, that they didn't need to be reported as long as they hit the VCPs, that basically the tracker would know if anybody needed to be disqualified or dinged for going off course. Also at the driver's meeting, they made it a point that as long as you hit all the VCPs and didn't cut the course by more than half a mile, that was acceptable.
Okay guys, I know in San Felipe, multiple lines. Like you guys say, we're pretty much racing from BCP to BCP. There's parallel lines everywhere. Yeah, in general, especially like I said here in San Felipe, it's open. So I'm being totally direct on you guys that you just BCP 14, you do have to turn. But out there, from BCP to BCP, all the BCPs are at the start and at the end. So it really doesn't matter to me, because it's better, it's safer to me that you guys have multiple lines. So if you're on the left, right, up on the bank or whatever, it's fine. You're not gonna get in trouble for that.
We went back to our GPS and started marking our course and checking where we'd gone, and we'd actually found out that we'd added 0.4 of a mile to our race. So we actually traveled further than some other cars, which according to the SCORE rules was acceptable to find a longer, smoother ride. In talking to Jose G, after reviewing the video, he realized that SCORE maybe hadn't made it real clear, and it was brought to my attention by other racers that in previous years it might have been mentioned, or that it was mentioned at driver's meeting, that taking Morelia Road would result in a disqualification. When I talked to Jose G about this, he did indicate to me that they might have missed it and that he was sorry, and that maybe this was unfair to us for not knowing, but that he was not willing to change the results due to it changing the points for everyone and upsetting a lot of people. It was also mentioned that during a certain VCP number 18 that people were allowed to take a road that was just to the right of the race course, and that wouldn't be an issue, that they just had to look out for local traffic, other chase vehicles, and anything else that could be an obstacle. This actually proved to be a problem during the race because several trophy trucks took that road and weren't able to get back on the course safely, including one that actually had to run over some people's tents to get back onto the course to hit his VCP. It was also mentioned in the driver's brief that if anybody went on the road during a certain section of the race where the race course paralleled a highway, they would be disqualified. That was made very clear, and there was no question that was wrong and that you would get disqualified for that. There was nothing to indicate to us that what we did was wrong or would result in a disqualification. After reviewing the racer brief, I found that the closest thing that we could have come into violating was major course deviation, where if a race car deviated from the course in a large section and had an advantage, that they would be penalized. This penalty would result in a 10-minute per mile penalty imposed on the race team if they found that they were in violation of a major course deviation. Nowhere in there did it say that if you deviated from the course that you would be disqualified.
We followed what we thought was the rules, and we went back and we even checked our notes, and Morelia Road was never mentioned as to not be used. In fact, it was actually told to us that we were allowed to use the best course we can as long as we hit the VCPs and didn't cut the course by more than a half a mile. When I found out that other racers took Morelia Road and they didn't get disqualified for the same exact thing that we got disqualified for, it was really frustrating to find out that SCORE didn't apply the same rules evenly across the board. So it was really peculiar that 11 days later we were disqualified, but other people still to this day haven't been disqualified for doing the same exact thing that we did.
I don't think anybody took this road to try to cheat, but I feel they did it because there was no mention that doing this would result in a disqualification or a penalty of any sort. In reviewing the rules and regulations of SCORE International, we found out that official results are issued the following morning at 9 a.m. before the award ceremony. This means that people have time to contest anybody. SCORE has proper time to look over the trackers and see if anybody cheated or had any reason to be disqualified. So we feel SCORE had the proper time to review and look over everybody's tracker and see if anybody needed to be disqualified. You know, in any organization, company, group of people, basically anything that you do and you try to do it right, there should be rules. And those rules should be written down so that people can read them, understand them, and have the ability to ask questions if they're unsure about something.
Or at least it should be talked about in the driver's meeting. So when we found out that we broke an undocumented rule and that rule was not applied to everybody, it felt like we were singled out.
I'm pretty passionate about this. I mean, there's rules set in place. There's rules that everybody should follow, and everything should be well stated. In this situation, it's just unfortunate. Not all the information was given, and they're getting penalized for it, and that's not right. I've spent a good amount of time talking to Ernesto and Chapo on the events of the San Felipe, and it's unfortunate. I feel they have done everything they could to show what they did was fair and that everybody was given the same amount of rules. Maybe there should still be a penalty or something like that, but nothing has been brought to their attention, and now enough time is just like blow over, move on, and it does suck. I was bummed about it. I look at them as friends. I want them to see them do well. I want them to compete in the series and be competitive, and unfortunately, this is, it's definitely a setback.
There's a lot of discrepancies in how the rules are enforced in SCORE, and with the growing classes of UTVs and the larger dollar amounts involved in the class, I think it's very important that everybody is treated the same and the rules are followed.
I feel that this video kind of goes along with the Chapo motto of never give up. We feel a great injustice has been done, and we're not going to give up. Even though we're not going to be able to get this changed, we'd like to know what you think.